So you are getting the hang of Smite, and you are looking to expand the list of gods you play. Or perhaps you are looking to change role or class. Well, look no further. As a follow-up to our beginner's guide to Smite, we have the top 5 warriors to learn while starting out in the role. As with most of our guides of this type, we won't be getting into exact builds, but I do release a bunch of gameplay videos, so make sure you sub to the channel to be notified of a guide or video for your favourite god when it comes out. The first god I will recommend, and the first one most people will likely recommend, is Chuck, especially for anyone unfamiliar with the tankier roles of MOBAs. And the main reason is relatively simple. Chuck is safe, because of his sustain. When Chuck activates his third ability, he summons rain in a circular area around him. This area will slow down his enemies, which is great. That gives you the space to move and either chase them down or run away. But more importantly, for newer players, this ability heals you when it is active. This means mistakes are less punishing so long as you can run away to the safety of your team after you take some damage that you didn't expect, and you can heal up ready to go again. On top of that, his kit is pretty simple too. Your passive builds every time you land a basic attack, which is when you left click an enemy, and when you have 5 charges, your next ability costs no mana and has a shorter cooldown, making Chuck even easier to manage than some of the more mana intensive or high cooldown characters in this list. Your first ability is a giant AoE or area of effect. You throw your axe to the target location, dealing damage near where it lands. A spectral axe then remains there for a while, and this is the only complicated part of Chuck's kit. While this axe is on the ground, your 2 basic abilities gain additional effects. Your second ability does damage around you and grants you more protections, which reduce incoming damage. So this is great to hit in the middle of a fight, as it will help bring the enemies low and keep you nice and tanky. If you activate this while your axe from your first ability is still in the ground, however, you will dash to the axe, passing through gods, walls and anything else in your way, and complete the spin attack at the axe's location. So your most typical way to enter a fight is to throw the axe and use your second ability to teleport there, dealing damage. Your third ability is the healing rain we already spoke of. If you activate this while your axe is on the ground, you will spawn a circle of rain around the axe too. This second AoE of rain will not heal you any extra, but will slow enemies in a much larger area, and can be really effective to disrupt team fights, and is possibly your most important ability. Focus on getting this right, using it to conduct the team fights, and you will be well on your way to mastering Chuck. Finally, we have your ultimate ability. When you hit it, you take reduced damage and become CC immune, so no stuns, slows, knockups or anything can stop you. While it is charging, you can still move around, but after a second you will come crashing down into the ground, dealing good damage, silencing and knocking up any enemies near you. Try engaging on your opponents with your first ability, then either use your 2 to dash into them if it's safe to do so, or use your 3 to slow them, then run towards them ready to pop your ultimate, making your engage safer and knocking them up, ready for your team to wipe the floor with them. The rest of this list are in no particular order. Really, I randomised the list after Chuck, so my own bias wouldn't even affect it. That being said, the next god is actually one I love playing, and the one I would recommend to anyone wanting to learn warriors in the solo lane specifically, once again because of how safe it is, and that is Vamana. Don't let this little guy fool you, he really packs a punch and is one of the more aggressive warriors on the list, with the least amount of CC of any of my picks, but probably the highest potential to carry a game. Vamana's safety tool is his first ability, the longest escape tool of any warrior. When activated, Vamana will begin spinning his umbrella in front of him and will peg it, as we say over here, i.e. he will run really fast. As he runs, enemies he hits with his umbrella will be knocked up and out of the way. This is an especially great tool for the longer maps of Conquest and Slash. If you get caught anywhere you shouldn't be, you can simply turn and run away with your 1, and very, very few gods will be able to catch you. One important tip for Vamana's dash is that you can cancel it at any time. If you ever need to stop dashing to use another ability, or maybe you knocked up an enemy and you just want to stop running so you can hit them straight away, then right click and you will stop the ability. Vamana's passive grants him bonus power and attack speed based on his physical protections. So, for example, if you bought 100 worth of physical protections, you would gain 20 power and 10% attack speed from his passive. These are a nice bonus, but without much CC to offer, you better be hitting hard. Your second ability on Vamana is where the damage starts to kick in though. You flick your umbrella forward, dealing damage in a cone shape in front of you. A super simple damaging ability, and yet another reason why Vimana is a great starter for folks. His damage is pretty simple to understand, although there is definitely an easy to learn and hard to master thing about this little man. The third ability is more damage, and a little slow. You throw your umbrella like a boomerang, dealing damage in a line in front of you and slowing enemies it hits. Once it reaches its maximum range, it then flies back to you, dealing damage and slowing again as it passes back through enemies. So the trick is to try and get this to hit enemy gods on the way out and back again. If you're struggling to do this, don't worry, that happens to basically everyone. Try comboing it with your allies if they have a means to hold enemy gods still, or you can try knocking them up with your first ability and then throwing this out. Vimana's ultimate ability is yet more safety. And this is why once you understand when you should and shouldn't engage, I think it's a good idea to upgrade from Chuck to Vimana. If you don't need that healing from Chuck because you aren't taking unnecessary damage, then Vimana is even safer as you learn the game. If the enemy somehow managed to chase your dash, thinking they might finally be able to get to kill you, all you need to do is pop this ability, get big and walk away. When you activate Vimana's ultimate ability, you grow massively in size, becoming immune to all crowd control or CC, gaining additional protections, gaining health regeneration and a shield over time, and becoming able to walk through player-made walls. This is the big baby. While in this form, your basic attack becomes a small AoE cone in front of you, letting you stomp on multiple enemies at once, dealing a good amount of damage while nearly being unkillable. In fact, the more the enemies hit you in this form, the longer it lasts. So pop this and get stuck in. You can't activate other abilities, so just stomp and smash your way through whatever is left of the enemy lines. To get the most out of Vimana, you want to poke and prod constantly with your second and third abilities, saving your first ability to knock up aggressive enemy gods or to get to a safe location if you need it. When times are getting tough and you are surrounded, break out into big baby mode and make them regret targeting you. Next up on the list is Osiris. We have mostly had ability-based warriors so far, despite Vimana in big baby mode, and the other two after this are also pretty ability focused, so Osiris is here if you were looking for that god that can swing a sword, or in his case a flail, and a sickle. Anyway, that being said, Osiris is no slouch with his abilities, and I can highly recommend learning him because I can't remember a time where he wasn't viable. He's just such a good all-rounder, and if you're playing Conquest especially, he's a bit of a lane bully with excellent minion killing potential thanks to his two basic attacks at the end of his chain cleaving multiple targets. This makes him really easy to pilot and a great choice for beginners. Osiris's passive grants him a charge each time he uses an ability. For each charge, he shreds a fragment of his physical form, becoming an ethereal spirit-looking thing, and gains magical and physical protections for each charge. At max charges, which is 8, he can even walk through player-made walls, and isn't slowed when attacking for a time. His first two abilities go hand in hand, and are very similar in premise. They do damage at a range on a very short cooldown and help Osiris get closer to or further away from the target. The first ability throws his left weapon, a sickle, out in a straight line. It stops on the first god or minion hit, sticking in them and dealing damage while slowing them down. His second ability sees him raise his right weapon, his flail, calling forth spiritual energy, dealing damage in a circular AoE at a distance. If this hits an enemy minion or god, Osiris gains movement speed. And if this hits the target with the sickle stuck in them from your first ability, it doubles the amount that they are slowed as well. This is his bread and butter, constant and consistent poke from a distance, slowing your enemies and speeding you up, letting you run circles around them, or just hit and run over and over. You'll spend the majority of the early game just sort of doing this. His third ability though, is easily his most important. When activated, this third ability throws out tethers to enemy gods near him, and for the next 4 seconds they all deal reduced damage, and if they are still within the range of the tether when it expires, they are stunned. Now, imagine we are in the closing stages of a game. You're down to your final few arena tickets, or the enemy is knocking on your phoenix, and you need to pull off a huge team fight. Osiris is the key. Currently when maxed out, this damage reduction on his third ability is 35%. If you hit all 5 enemy gods, mathematically that basically makes it a 5 versus 3 in terms of damage, with all of them dealing massively decreased damage for those 4 seconds. Practically tickling your team. You won't see any huge explosion, there likely won't be a huge 5-god stun that the entire team praises either. Osiris is the silent carry of every team fight. A little thankless, but always a threat. His ultimate is also a little thankless. For carrying such a huge weight in teamfights, his ultimate is just a leap. He just sort of jumps. It's a good escape tool, albeit on a long cooldown, and you'll CC immune too, but all in all this has to be one of the weakest or least fun ultimates in the game. Sorry. If you land the tiny AoE on a god though, they can't heal for 6 seconds, which is pretty good in some matchups, but I typically hold it for escape and focus on my other abilities or basic attacks. With Osiris, you play a game of 2 halves. You poke and prod with your low cooldown Sickle and Flail, and then when you're finally ready to strike, you dominate the teamfights as the Silent Saboteur. The next god is one I am yet to see recommended to beginners, and I cannot fathom why. It is a perfect combination of simple to execute kit, super survivability, with a fun and impactful mechanic, and that is Nike. Nike is the best all-rounder in terms of my beginner criteria so far, and she beats out the next one too. With a solid escape, good ranged poke, great CC, and the biggest oh shit button of them all, once you're done with Chak, or perhaps if you don't even like the look of Chak, she has to be my next in line to recommend. And this is just because she's so well rounded. There is no one key skill for her. They are all just as important as one another, so let's just start with the passive. Fortunately, this is one you can just sort of forget as well, giving you less to worry about as a new player. Nike grants a global team buff every time you hit one of her 3 goals. The first is to kill 10 gods as a team, the second is to kill 250 minions as a team, and then you need to get 2 allies to level 20. Each one of these milestones grants your entire team more power and more movement speed. And honestly, this is quite an underrated passive that can really make a difference for some of your teammates, but again flies very much under the radar. Nike's first ability is her standard minion clearing, god poking, hurty ability. When activated, you slam your spear into the ground 3 times, dealing damage in a line in front of you, removing protections from a god if you hit them twice, and disarming you if you hit them all 3 times. Now this hits pretty hard and is really annoying to play against because it's so damn thick. Oh, and the whole time you're knock-up immune, so you can even use it to make sure you don't get booped by a Sobek or Geb, for example. Knight's second ability is one of my favourite abilities in the entire game because it can move enemy gods. Smite, unlike most MOBAs, doesn't have that many skills that move you against your will, mainly because it's quite jarring for an over-the-shoulder game to have your perspective bounced around the map, but Nike's is one of the most fun and most disruptive of these. When activated, you create a barrier in front of you that blocks ranged basic attacks. While the barrier is active, however, you move and turn more slowly, but, as with your first ability, you are knock-up immune. At any point of your choosing, you can click again to fire the barrier, dealing damage in an area in front of you. However, the fun part of the barrier is that any enemy that comes into contact with it is pushed back and away from it. Now you could use this to save your team, or maybe isolate the enemy carry or mage in a team fight, but where's the fun in that? My personal joy for this skill comes from somehow getting behind the enemy and using it to push a single target into my entire team for them to devour. And because we're such a safe god, it's rare that this goes badly for us. And how do you get behind the enemy, I hear you asking? Well, that's a great question. And that's where Nike's third ability comes in. It's a leap. It's about as standard as you can get for a Smite leap in terms of movement, although where you land, you knock up enemies that you fall on. And that is where the fun starts. If you leap at the enemy with this skill, then when they are knocked up, you move behind them. You can activate your second ability as they land, pushing them into your team, and their inevitable doom. Naturally, this is also a really good escape, and you should use it for that whenever you need to. It is a part of what makes Nike such a strong contender on this list, but there's also the fun side. Last but not least is Nike's ultimate, the aforementioned oh shit button. When activated, Nike expels bright light, releasing a huge shockwave of damage in a circular AoE around her, slowing enemies caught by it, and granting herself a huge shield based on her maximum health. This ability does so much for Nike. It is initiation. If you jump into the enemy team and you can slow them all, that's going to be a good team fight. It is damage for kills. It racks up with your first and second ability to really punch down hard. And it is a huge chunk of shielding to save you in your time of need, so you can get your leap back off cooldown and jump to safety. This ability, like all of Nike's abilities, just does so much for her, yet it's pretty simple to use. So, leap into the enemy, cause chaos with your bouncing shield, shred protections, disarm and damage the enemy, before popping your huge shield just as you're about to die, putting the final nail in the enemy's coffin as they overcommit to you, and you wander back to base for some heals. The final god on the list is perhaps the most tenuous. His kit is simple enough but not the safest, although he is usually exceptionally tanky and hard to kill. That comes from understanding how his sustain works. And that is Hercules. So, the most important skill to understand for Hercules is that heal, his third ability. The rest are quite simple and provide great CC and damage, but this ability gives him all of his staying power in fights. When activated, this ability heals Hercules for a small amount. A tiny amount. If I was okay with lying with you, I would just tell you that it didn't heal, because once you have any amount of health from levels and items, it will feel like it didn't. After it has been activated, however, you will get a buff for the next 4 seconds, granting you additional protections. When that buff runs out, you are healed for a massive percentage of all the damage you took during those 4 seconds. At max level, this is 70% of all the damage you took currently. So, let's say it's later on in the game, you have about 2,500 health. The enemy team jumps on you and will deal 2,000 damage, leaving you at just a measly 500, barely surviving. If you wait until after the fight to heal, you will gain somewhere in the range of 200 health from the heal, leaving you at about 700 in our little example here. However, if you popped your heal before the fight, you would take less damage anyway because of the protections, but then even after that, the close to 2,000 damage you took would get healed back up as you gain close to 1,400 health from your buff expiring, leaving you at over 1,900 health. That's nearly triple what you would have if you healed after the fact. So the long and short of this is, if you're going to take damage soon, just press 3. If the enemy is smart, they won't hit you, knowing it will be futile, but that just means you have 4 seconds of total freedom to do whatever the hell you want to them. And speaking of doing whatever you want to the enemy team, let's go over those other destructive abilities. First and foremost, Hercules is passive. Each time Hercules takes damage from an enemy god, he gains a stack, and can gain a maximum of 3 stacks. For each stack he has, he gains power, so he hits harder when he gets hurt. This combos quite nicely with the huge power scaling on his other skills. Power scaling is something we haven't really touched on yet, so if you're not sure how it works, every skill gains bonus damage based on your power. But to balance gods more effectively, the percentage of your power that is converted to damage is different for different gods and different skills. But in Hercules' case, he gets pretty good power scaling, so his passive hits extra hard. Your first ability is a dash, but it is rare that I use this as an escape. Your third ability is much better in that respect, and this is because this dash doubles as a push. If you hit an enemy as you are dashing, you take them with you, pushing them to your new location and dealing good damage. This combos especially well with your second ability, which when activated shatters the earth ahead of you in a wide line of damage, and any enemy at the very end of it is knocked into the air and lands harmlessly at your feet. If you, like with Nike, position behind the enemy as they are flying in the sky, you can push them into your team with your first ability, dealing great damage to them and all but confirming their death. Now, just in case they survive, or just in case anyone survives any fight and begins to run away from you, Hercules can make use of his ultimate. When activated, your ultimate ability tears a boulder out of the ground, or in the case of the skin I regularly use, it tears a beach ball out of the ground, and you throw it at a target location. It deals huge damage where it lands, and then rolls away from you for a couple more seconds. Any god hit along the way while it's rolling will take the same huge amount of damage from it. It can even hit the same god multiple times, although each time it hits the same enemy god it does less damage. This is just an excellent finisher move. I regularly use this to snipe kills that are a little too far away, but you can also dump it onto a god that you've stunned with your first ability to just confirm the crazy amount of damage. As Hercules, you want to instill fear in your enemies by plucking them away from safety with your second ability, and with your one pushing them back into your team. Then, when it's finally time to fight, make sure, for the love of God, that you hit your 3 as you step up, negating all of the damage the enemy team can muster. And now you are about ready to take on the world as a powerful, tanky frontline warrior. That isn't where the game ends, so before you jump into your next game, be sure to check out our guide playlist here and make sure there aren't any tips and tricks or little hints that you're missing out on that would assist you in that next win.